Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're looking at the 2013 Kedarnath disaster, unpacking exactly how this absolutely unprecedented tragedy unfolded high up in the Himalayas. Picture this. It's early June 2013. Everything feels like just another normal, bustling pilgrimage season, right? Shops are open, mules are busy carrying folks up the steep trails, and hotels are literally packed to the brim with thousands of really joyful travelers. It is incredibly chilling when you think about it. This peaceful, vibrant scene sitting in stark contrast to the horrific natural tragedy that was about to hit just hours later. Now, to truly wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this disaster, we've got to look at the geography. Kedarnath sits at a staggering 3,500 meters above sea level. That's nearly 2.5 miles up, right next to the Mandakini River. And crucially, it's nestled deep within the Himalayas. You know, we often think of mountains as these immovable objects, but the Himalayas are actually one of the youngest, most actively shifting mountain ranges on the entire planet. So we're not talking about stable ground here. It's a highly sensitive geological zone where the Earth is constantly in flux. So what kicked off this massive chain of events? Well, that year, the monsoons pushed into northern India way earlier than anyone expected. Abnormal amounts of heavy rain-bearing moisture from both the Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea basically collided. They converged directly over these high Himalayan peaks. It was quite literally a perfect meteorological storm, throwing up a massive red flag that the region just wasn't prepared for. And this brings us to the biggest, yet completely unseen, threat of the whole event. Korabari Tal, which is also known as Gandhi Sarovar. It's this high-altitude glacial lake tucked just out of sight, right behind the ancient temple. Fueled by that relentless early monsoon rain and rapidly melting snow, this lake was quietly filling up to extremely dangerous levels. It was essentially a ticking time bomb, completely unnoticed by the thousands of vulnerable people gathered down below. You can really see how the tension steadily builds day by day. By June 14th, the rainfall had already blown way past normal seasonal levels. By the 15th, the soaked earth started giving way. We're talking small rock falls and landslides blocking minor paths. And then, by the morning of June 16th, sitting under these oppressively gray skies, the Mandakini River turned wildly aggressive, violently crashing against its banks. Nature was giving us incredibly clear warning signs, but tragically, the crowds just didn't realize what was coming. By the evening of June 16th, the whole atmosphere had grown incredibly eerie. The rain was absolutely unrelenting, but honestly, the worst part was the sound. Strange, restless echoes are bouncing off the mountain walls as the water roared through the valley. Locals, people who intimately know the rhythms of these mountains, felt this deep, chilling sense of dread. They knew for sure that the environment was behaving in a way they hadn't seen before. Between 8 and 10 p.m., that creeping dread turned into a terrifying reality. Widespread power cuts plunged the entire area into pitch blackness. And at the exact same time, urgent reports started coming in that massive landslides had effectively blocked all downward escape roads. So anyone trying to flee the impending danger, they were now completely trapped, in the dark, with absolutely no way out. Despite a totally sleepless, terrifying night for the locals, the clock struck 4 a.m. on June 17th, and most of the visiting pilgrims just began their normal morning prayer routines. It's a heartbreaking twist of fate, really. They were up, preparing for worship, completely unaware that the saturated earth high above them was already starting to give way. Then, the early morning silence just shattered completely. First, a deafening roar broke from the mountains, tearing through the valley. Next, the ground shook violently right beneath their feet. And then, a massive, utterly unstoppable torrent of freezing water, gigantic rocks, and uprooted trees crashed down upon the town. The glacial lake had breached. In a matter of seconds, it was absolute chaos. Before anyone could even process what was happening or try to scramble the higher ground, a second, far louder roar echoed through the valley. This next wave of debris was so incredibly massive, witnesses said it looked like the mountain itself had literally collapsed. It tore through the settlement with unbelievable force, wiping out multi-story concrete buildings like they were made of paper. Yet, in the middle of all this total destruction came what is probably the most talked about moment of the entire tragedy. A colossal boulder, carried down by the sheer force of the flood, washed into town and stopped dead, right behind the Kedarnath temple. Miraculously, this giant rock acted like a wedge. It split the destructive flow of mud and debris perfectly in two, saving the ancient stone structure from taking a direct hit. The before and after contrast here is just absolutely heartbreaking. That vibrant, joyful town filled with thousands of pilgrims from literally just a day prior had been instantly erased from the map. By the afternoon of June 17th, it was reduced to a silent, completely unrecognizable wasteland of deep mud and broken stones. The air was just heavy with despair as survivors frantically searched the debris for their loved ones. For those who miraculously survived the initial impact, well, a grueling new nightmare had just begun. They were completely cut off from the rest of civilization. Think about it. No food, no warm clothes to fight the freezing Himalayan temperatures, and zero medical aid for the severely injured. Plus, with all the cell networks destroyed, they had absolutely no way to call the outside world for help. Finally, on the morning of June 18th, the severe weather offered a brief, desperately needed window of mercy. The thick skies cleared up just enough, and the distant, rhythmic hum of rescue helicopters pierced the silence. It brought the very first glimmer of hope to thousands of stranded, exhausted people who had just spent the night in freezing terror. What followed was, without a doubt, one of the most perilous, complex, and massive rescue operations in Indian history. It required a monumental joint effort. The Indian Army, the Air Force, the IDBP, and the NDRF all rapidly mobilized. They had to coordinate efforts while navigating completely destroyed terrain and highly unstable ground. Every single extraction they made was a high-risk maneuver. But tragically, this incredible heroic effort came at a very high cost. On June 25th, right in the middle of the ongoing evacuation, an Indian Air Force rescue helicopter crashed in the treacherous weather. Brave rescue personnel lost their lives while risking everything to save absolute strangers. It's a really sobering reminder of the extreme peril these first responders faced every single time they took to the sky. When the massive operation finally wrapped up, the true, horrifying scale of the disaster was revealed to the world. Thousands of people were left dead or simply missing in the debris. Countless children were orphaned, and thousands of families were permanently shattered by the events of that single morning. The human toll was almost impossible to comprehend. As Kedarnath rebuilds today, we are left with a massive, lingering question. Are we truly better prepared now? Have we actually learned our lesson about the absolute necessity of early warning systems and sustainable development in the fragile Himalayas? It's something we all absolutely need to think about as we move forward. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.